Good morning. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, and you have reached Venus Unplugged. And what I do here is speak extemporaneously about the archetype of Venus, Psyche, Eros, not only Venus as a planetary influence, but as an archetype of our world, of our psyche. A very underestimated archetype, and one that we don't understand enough. We just think it's all about love and what we're going to get or what we're going to give, but it's so much more. So what I am attempting to do here for the last couple of years is about creating inspiration for new myths, exploring the old ones and fairy tales, and certainly the work of Jung, and also through my own clairvoyant talents. But we need to be able to enter the realm of Venus and Psyche and myth. And that's a path. It's not like, yo, I want this and here it is. So that's what's going on here. And in case you haven't noticed, the world is hanging by a very thin thread. And that thread is Psyche. Now, for those of you who know the myth of Psyche and Eros, Aphrodite, or Venus, is also known as Venus, initiated Psyche. And that's a very important distinction. She and Aphrodite, the archetype of Venus, influenced and trained and initiated Psyche into becoming. Now, Psyche is also soul. And what we've been looking at here is AION, which is one of Christ. Listen to me. Okay, there was my Jungian truth slipping right out. Slipping right there. I guess that is my belief, okay, so that on some level the work of Jung has to do with the evolution of Christ consciousness. Now, the Christ in what I'm talking about has to do with the symbolic self with capital S, S-E-L-F, this true self. So when there's an integration or an individuation, which is what Jung refers to as wholeness, of anima and animus and shadow and ego, and we start to see the players on this chess game of life, that alignment allows the self, the true self, the divine, the Christ consciousness, or Buddhic or whatever you want to call it, access. The wheels start working and perception changes. Now, why are we doing this? To have a brighter smile? Well, that may be part of it, but it is because we are here. I mean, here, right now, in this time in history, to create new myths, because the myth of the hero is no longer the residing myth that is going to help evolve. And that's also part of why everything is happening right now, that we are hanging on this thread, and this thread is Psyche, and Psyche knows. So I was, I attempted to read the Red Book several hundred times, and I get through it, but it's like really intense. But also, Tolkien wrote a Red Book too, not the same as Jung. So just dropping that bomb in the middle of your morning to go exploring Jung's Red Book and Tolkien's Red Book, because what's going to happen, and if we look back 500 years from now, I suspect that these two people, these two men, was the beginning of our mythic change, the retelling of the story because it's not a hero's journey, but it is about discovery, because they did enter realms, I think, literally. As a matter of fact, I can say I know it, because from my own experience, you can enter these realms. Then you're not quite the same for the next 7 years, but you can start figuring it out. So this is part of what Venus Unplugged is about. Inspiration to begin to rewrite the mythos of our time. So hopefully a star is shining on our meeting today, and you will be inspired. Now, the archetype of Christ, okay, the way it's presented in the Christian religion, it's only half of an archetype from a psychological point of view. The part of the great distortion of our own individuation process is we don't accept. We only want to be good, and that's probably pretty dangerous. Because without being able to accept that the full archetype is Christ/Lucifer, or the Antichrist, or whatever. Don't let that scare you. Hold that tension. What is that about? Because the way it's presented, or how the early religious fathers branded Christ, okay, it's only half of. They separated. Christ was only good, and the devil was only evil, which means man gets to carry it. But what it really means is that Christ Lucifer is the whole, and not taking these literally, taking this creatively in works of art. If you're, let's say, doing a sculpture, is the back better than the front, or the left better than the right? No, it's the other side. So when there's not a lot of judgment and we can just start observing, we see that there can never be form without shadow and light. And there certainly can never be form in us. So by this omission, and heaven knows we've got a shitload of commission and omission going on in our society right now, and that needs to be corrected and taken responsibility for. Okay, so evil is deprived of its substance by the idea that it's a mere accident, or the belief that it's an absence of good. Oh no, evil is an absence of good in the metaphysical world. That's not true. So we set up a dynamic that all good belongs to God and all evil to man. We can't carry that. We're not strong enough to carry that. It's also not true. We carry it in the shadow. Now I have to remember, psyche is billions, trillions, gazillions of years old, and is also connected to the collective unconscious. So it is time to start being able to create with the concept of shadow and light as the whole of the archetype. So this takes a lot of thought before you respond, and it's like, well, does that mean, good is, because people like to play this mind game, does that make evil good? No. It's like the yin and the yang, if you see it as that. So the psychological law that was overlooked was shadow and light, Christ, Lucifer, above, below. So being able to move into that so we can begin to create the myths of our time, because we need to rewrite this and relive this. And when I don't necessarily mean literally rewrite, but that would be a good start to tell, how do myths begin? Well, I think one of it is going to be through the Red Book and certainly Tolkien's Red Book. So this self, yes, within ourselves, we all have a self. We're born of a self. From a psychological, not metaphysical, psychological angle, is it's always being crucified, just as in the symbol. And, the Antichrist is always being crucified by good. Good it goes on, and it just start feeling your way through. Just make believe you never even had the concept of judgment or this is good and this is bad. And just play with these colors or words and begin to feel and be able to contain and see, because if we can't, we are in big trouble, people, really big trouble. And it's for those who are capable of imagining new ways, new possibilities. It is your responsibility to re-image of how it could be. So, the ego is always being crucified between the opposites. And that's just what is constantly happening. The shadow and the light. And the ego gets, that's the whole, being able to hold the tension of the opposites. Hold Christ, Lucifer. Just hold them together. Don't split apart. Oh, this is good or this is bad. Oh, I better not think that. Or, oh, no. Yes, both. And being able to give yourself the time and the psychological imagining, or asking at night in a dream to give and teach in dreams. Now, even if you don't remember your dreams, it doesn't matter. You still have been influenced. Because that's something that can be developed over time. Or if you do active imagination, it all comes from the same image-creating aspect of every human being. So whether we create the image of evil or the image of good, we are still image-making. We have created images of religions and are running off killing one another by our images. It's like shadow boxing, only it's with bombs. And now, when we begin to recognize, how did all of this start? Which is always a good thing to be thinking about. In the early church fathers, there was an assumption that just went haywire. And let's just say with the example that, that the basic flaw in St. Basil's argument, and the argument is that you're assuming from the beginning what you want to prove in the end, is this. The old church fathers were just saying, well, that no, evil is, just the absence of good. I mean, if you really feel your way through on that one, that falls a little flat in terms of images. Oh no, that doesn't exist. That's just the absence. I didn't see that. So that I can't comprehend the shadow of just like we can't see our blind spot, right? We know it's there. Because believe me, your enemy knows where your blind spot is and is going to come right for you, which is why we need to understand our shadow. If I don't know if I'm weak in one area and abandon that aspect of myself, sitting duck or swan, if it's more Venusian, or dove. And so, start to re-image, being able to allow your imaginations, which is a very because our imagination is the thing that's doing all the Maya or the projection. So we can also start living the new, bringing in not the hero's journey of overcoming darkness and evil and dragons, but integration of, which is different. So we can start to understand that, the early teachings left out, guess what? Left out the shadow aspect of Christ. So Christ really is only half of the archetype. And since he's a symbol of the self, we're only one-sided. And we need to have both. And so this is part of, what I'm looking at now. How did all this distortion start? What is this about? Well, let's just say, if we only want to be good, and you do good, but you reject the opposite, other unsuspecting people have to carry what you disown. Oh, no, I'm the good person. That person is, well, not necessarily. What is really going on here? Which is, I think, the most important work we can possibly do is withdrawing our shadow and being able to say, I'm capable. I won't do it, but I am capable. We need to be able to start to understand what is happening. So if we're disown our shadow, and let's say somebody is walking by, or somebody is psychotic, or open, porous, or they believe that they are bad. So our disowned shadow, they've got to carry. So it's bad enough that they're wounded and feel that they're bad, because that's what shaming is. Shaming doesn't say you've sinned. Shaming says you are the sin. You are the badness. Not, whoops, shot the arrow and missed the mark, which is what sin really means. The etymology of sin is it's an archery term. You're a bad shot. Correct it. And I think it's an incredible image because, projection is, if we use that analogy of sin, we project our own shadow onto another. We're missing the mark. We're not seeing, I wonder where that lives in me. Now, that doesn't mean you're living it out, but it does mean that it's in your Crayola box. And that keeps one very humble and related to the earth, because that's where we belong. Here in earth, tripping over one another and trying to understand this principle of love that is ruled by Aphrodite and Venus. So when we become deeply responsible, or we dial up our moral compass, which definitely needs to be done, we begin to understand shadow and light, The denial of doesn't dispel the shadow by creating we create an imbalance in shadow and light. Now, let's say on the other side, when we're doing something good, kind, or generous, we need to become conscious. Is my goodness going to provoke envy in the other person, and that's going to make them suffer? Because sometimes you want to do something good, and you do, but let's say you can't solve the whole problem, but you contribute to helping, and very often that will be received with envy. Well, if you gave me one apple, why didn't you give me the whole barrel of apples? Says envy. It's always going on whether you like it or not. It's being able to not look at it directly, because in the mythology, it's like we reflect. You cannot look at evil directly, because you will turn to snakes and stones. But so this is very important. If you give to a very envious person, you just stirred up some serious black magic, whether you know it or not. We need to recognize and we cannot recognize if we don't know, or at least intellectually know before we can feel it. Remember, we're living in this extroverted thinking country, and part of everything that's being thrown in our face is because people can't feel. So it's like the sins of omission and commission. It's like, oh, well, I didn't know. Well, no, you didn't name it. And now that it's named, oh, it needs to be named? Oh, that's interesting. You couldn't feel your way through that and not care what it was named? But stand for what you believe in, and maybe, okay, well, the truth of the matter, people are standing for what they believe in. They believe if I can get away with it, and as long as nobody names me or holds me accountable, or the society doesn't hold one another accountable, I get away with it. Not really. But who wants to wait 500 years till the person meets themselves again as their own grandchild or something? Okay? Evil knows this. Evil is not a dumb force. It's an archetype. It's the other half. It knows. And it loves. That evil is the absence of good. If you what was it, the Screw Tape Letters, where C.S. Lewis really goes at this one, because it's a story of a training of a young devil, and when people just think they're so pious, they just go like, oh no, and well, I guess pious and bias do kind of go together. The teaching devil goes like, no, let them think they're marvelous, but meanwhile, secretly, they don't want to do this, and they're really meanies, but they're making believe they're so good, and that's 5 points for us. So we're not naming, we're observing. These are creative forces. We won't have any form without shadow and light. So see it as a creative force to work with. And that when we're seeing what we're seeing, the sum total, what we're looking at is the end of the hero's myth. That's archetypally what we're looking at. We can name it whatever else we want to name it and tell whatever story we want to tell. But that's what's going on. And within that, the new version, or the evolutionary version of a humanity that can hold shadow and light and not act out all over the place. That's what individuation is. I can see both of those within myself. And also not take on the projections of others. People could project all sorts of stuff on you, and if you know it's not true because you know your shadow, or the shoe doesn't fit, as they say, then, the thing is, how are we going to muse or question ourselves? Somebody projects onto me. The first thing I do is I give it all possibilities. I say, well, is that true? Could it be true? How could it be true? How is it true from known or the unknown? Before I immediately, reject it. And sometimes I don't reject it. I say, well, there is truth. There is some truth in that. Maybe it's not, all-encompassing truth. There's a little touch of that. I can see that happening that way. Because that's what it gives us the individuation. Then we can say, oh, I can see that. Or, it can be, actually, sorry, man, that's just going to slip right away because that does not belong to me. That's the projection of another. But it takes reflection. That's why we have creativity. It takes works of art. It takes and works of play. Play is a very important meditation. Okay. So, as I said, evil knows the belief of, that it's the absence of good. Bullshit. It's evil, man. And then it gets very, very dangerous because we're fed by it's a dangerous innocence, which is born of ignorance and born of our own unacknowledged other half, and also taught because the early church fathers could not comprehend because they hadn't evolved enough. And that's what they say, there's always a Messiah or a figure, an evolutionary figure that comes in usually 2,000 years before the shift. And what is it the shift in? Humanity hasn't changed that much, in case you haven't noticed. But what does shift is the storytelling. That's what shifts, the mythos. So let's say what's happening in our world right now. If we know another person is being abused in some form or another, and we do nothing, we're just as abusive. You may feel that, well, I'm just little and the world is big and I can't do anything about it. You can pray for a person, or you can in some way help, or you can write an article, or you can, not a rant, but because that's the other thing, with Facebook and all this, people just throwing crazy shit at one another, okay? That we must be part of all of this. This is what's happening now. So if nobody names that it's rape, then it's not rape? No. But this horrible situation, this is just the beginning, man. This is just the beginning. But it's, in a strange way, these ogres are really making the society reflect. So there you could see this Luciferian energy is making, holier than thou. So we go, gee, I didn't know that was going on. No, pony up. That's the excitement. That's the retelling of the myth. Blaming doesn't exonerate. Blaming very often just is projection for our own unacknowledged shadow stuff. So, And then there's the anima and the animus, which is really the really tellers of the story. So create. Be able to say, okay, what would that look like, the individuation, if both were true, and I didn't choose one over the other. This is a very hard thing to do. So, and then start creating with it, retelling the story, or certainly retelling the story. Let's say, okay, if you tend to worry, train yourself to turn the worry into pondering instead of worry. Gee, I wonder what this is about. I could look that up. Or, that was reflected in that movie I saw. Or, wow, that work of art really inspired me. Something like that. Ponder. Don't wring your hands and lament when it's not necessary. I mean, there's a place for lamenting. Not getting our way is not lamenting. It's not a place for lamenting. We just didn't get our way. And most of the time we don't get our way because there's a greater possibility that we don't even know about because we're living in shoes too small for our feet. So there we have it, and we will continue. And trick or treat. Bye-bye.